Well, let me formally welcome everyone here to today's webinar. We are going to be providing an overview of a pilot program that wrapped up this year in Michigan with the goal of incorporating measurements of soil health into the farmland appraisal process. I want to also mention that this work is generously supported by the Fred and Barbara Herb Family Foundation. So what we'll do today, just a brief rundown of our agenda. We'll introduce everyone who worked so hard on this project. We'll do a brief bit of overview about the concept of soil health, a bit of theoretical underpinnings for this project. We'll get into the nuts and bolts on everything that we did. And of course, we'll make sure there's plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. So with that, I would like to welcome the president of the Herb Family Foundation, Melissa Damashki, for a welcome here.
Thank you, Lucas, and good morning to everyone that's joining us. I'm Melissa Damashki, president of the Fred and Barbara Herb Family Foundation, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to today's learning opportunity with Delta Institute. The Herb Family Foundation is based in Michigan, just north of Detroit. I didn't have a chance to put that in the chat yet, but it's snowing here in Michigan, where we are as well. The foundation recently became a spend down foundation, and over the next 10 years, we'll spend down our assets to support our mission, which is we envision a flourishing, healthy, and resilient Great Lakes ecosystem and a culturally vibrant, sustainable Southeast Michigan. And that's why we're joining you today. Our foundation has been proud to partner with Delta Institute to support economic incentives for farmers. We understand that to make Lake Erie swimmable, drinkable, and fishable, especially in the Western Basin where we see toxic algae, we must support conservation practices by farmers to reduce excess phosphorus from agricultural runoff that causes the algae. We also understand there are many barriers that prevent this, including a lack of economic incentives for farmers to improve their soil health. Delta Institute's expertise, creativity, and approach to this work is outstanding. I'm always eager to learn more from them. Today is no exception and will be a great opportunity for us to learn about their soil health appraisal efforts here in Michigan. Lucas, thanks for organizing this opportunity and for your many efforts to improve the health of our Great Lakes and our communities.
Thank you, Melissa. And I'll just briefly say a bit about Delta Institute. We're a nonprofit organization. We help Midwestern communities solve complicated environmental problems. And one of the main arms of our efforts is around promoting the adoption of soil conservation practices for all of the reasons that Melissa just mentioned, improving water quality. And what we are really trying to do with work like this is to demonstrate that by adopting these practices, there may be opportunities to improve farmers' bottom lines as well. So I'll just briefly introduce, I'll continue to introduce myself, but then I really want folks to meet the experts that made this project happen. So again, my name is Lucas Chamberlain. I'm a specialist with Delta Institute. I have a soil science background as well as a farming background. So this project was just an absolute pleasure to be a part of. And Doug, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. And Doug Hodge, and I'm an appraiser. I've been doing appraisal work for, I don't want to really date myself, but for in excess of 40 years, served as past president of the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers on a national level. And I've worked, had my own company for a number of years. Since then, I have worked for Nuveen as their global agricultural appraiser, and also worked for International Farming Corporation, again, as their chief appraiser, and currently employed by both Capstone, which is my own company, and I work with People's Company as well as their chief appraiser. I guess just to add, I also have a small farm and a small organic flour mill.
Thank you, Doug. Rob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Rob Malcolmson from Davison, which is near Flint. I'm a certified crop advisor and former technician for the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program for Lapeer and Macomb County, and also have worked with MSU Extension as an urban ag technician here in Flint, getting urban gardens started and hoop houses and things. And then I also run my own farm where we do a lot of baling of hay, grow some corn, soybeans, wheat, rye, barley, make feed rations for people that have small flocks of chickens that want a non-GMO organic product. A little bit of produce we do, also pasture raised beef, put about a dozen pigs on feed every year, several hundred meat birds, and laying hens. So I have nothing to do, as you can see. Otherwise, I just love to help people make the most of their land resources and to protect the environment and also create good food so that we can be healthy as a people.
Thank you very much, Rob. So what I want to just do before we get into the real nuts and bolts of this pilot program that we're wrapping up is just provide a brief bit of background on kind of the theory, the underpinnings of our work here. And so first, just a little bit about the concept of soil health. What we're talking about is really the capacity for our soils to provide us with ecosystem services that we all rely on. So it's more than just productivity. It's this holistic view of soils and their services that they provide us. And you can diagnose soil health in the way you can diagnose, your own health with certain criteria and certain indicators. And there are a whole suite of soil health indicators. But for this project, we were looking at a specific handful that you'll hear us talking a bit more about. So I just wanted to introduce those at the top here. You'll hear us talk about total carbon, soil carbon and nitrogen, as well as their ratio to one another. And that relates to the amount of organic matter and plant available nutrients that are in your soil. Microbial respiration, and that is proxy for the amount of microbial activity that is occurring in your fields. And then we were also looking at bulk density as it relates to water absorption, water holding capacity, and soil compaction. And you'll also notice here there are links on this slide. And what we will do—
Hey, Lucas.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. It looks like you're not in presentation mode, so we can't actually see you advancing through the slides.
Oh, let me. Sorry about that. See if we can get back here. You're not in presentation mode. That is helpful. Thank you. See. Any luck there?
No, it's still not in the full screen mode for whatever reason. There we go. Looks good now.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Thank you. So, so you can see the screen, the slide nice and big here.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so this is just our overview of soil health. I was just mentioning that you'll see that there are some links here on these slides. And what we'll do is make sure that we share this slide deck with everyone here so that you can follow up on some of this information. There's plenty of information for you to dig into on your own, but this is just a brief overview here. The other thing we want to mention about soil health is that it is based on the soil's inherent characteristics. So, it's mineralogy, the slope of your field, things like that. But there's a baseline for its capacity to provide these services, but it can also be improved or degraded based on our management. So practices that are known to improve soil health are things like cover crops, no-till or reduced till, and these practices are recommended by the USDA. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about management of soil health. And before we dive fully in, I just wanted to provide a bit of our conceptual model of a market for soil health in land valuation. And essentially, we are thinking about several conditions or prerequisites that are required if soil health is something that will be valued in the land valuation process. And first, it needs to be shown, and there needs to be empirical evidence that by adopting these practices and building soil health, that you will improve your net farm income. Our ability to assess soil health needs to be quick and easy and affordable through testing. And it also needs to be agreed upon, and there needs to be evidence that building soil health is an investment, that it may take time, that it may take additional costs. There may be some potential losses, profit losses in the short run. But if there's no investment required for farmers to build their soil health, then really there's no value in buying land that already has these characteristics. So these are kind of these three conditions under which we see a future for soil health to be valued in land appraisals. And there is an emerging body of research that suggests that these conditions are being met. Specifically, if we look at case studies from Michigan of corn and soybean farms, the majority of farms that are surveyed in these case studies find that their net farm incomes do improve dollar per acre by adopting cover crops and no-till. And when we look more into the details of where these cost savings are coming from, you're seeing that there are notable cost savings in terms of fuel, electricity, fertilizer, and amendments, and in some cases, increased profits thanks to enhanced yields as well. So these partial budget analyses are kind of what are feeding our theory that soil health could be traded in the marketplace. So to wrap kind of everything up before we dive into what we did, the problem that we were trying to solve was that there's no way in the real estate appraisal process to empirically assess the value of soil health at $1 per acre. And that's because soil health is more than just yield. It's more than productivity. So we can't really use the National Commodity Crop Productivity Index. Rather, we want to come up with some kind of soil health index that tells us something about the soil of a subject property. And on the right side of the screen, you can see this kind of proof of concept that would be used on an appraisal report. The top 4 rows are these foundational metrics that you see on every appraisal report, and then followed at the bottom next to the stars by those soil health indicators that we use to assess soil health. And then at the bottom by the gold star is this conceptual soil health index that we've been working to create that gives you some kind of idea of where your field's soil health is compared to your neighbors and other market participants. So let's get into what we did. This is a modified approach for appraisal that incorporates measurements of soil health. And the basics of this program were that we provided operators with free appraisals and confidential soil health testing if they would permit us access to their land to take their soil samples and survey them and understand a little bit more about their land management history. In total, we had 8 properties in our subject cohort, 4 of which received formal appraisals. And we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But just as a reminder, the goals of our project were, we wanted to see, first of all, can we even incorporate measurements of soil health into the appraisal process? Is that something that's possible? Can we come up with some kind of metric, replicable, easy to create metric that tells market participants something about their soil health? And if so, if we can do those 2 things, can we analyze the effect of these assessments of soil health on sales prices and see if there's some kind of evaluation that can be inferred from that? And then overall, we just really wanted to use our findings to provide some kind of framework for farmers to track their soil health and to also open doors and opportunities for other producers to measure their soil health and to adopt these practices if they're interested. This project took about a year. We started in winter 2023 with all the prep. Then through the spring and summer of last year, we did the work that we will describe here in just a moment. And then over the fall, we did a lot of evaluation, refining, iteration, and that's the results of which we'll be discussing here today. So it was about a year's worth of work. And we were looking at 4 southeastern Michigan counties, specifically as they relate to their relation to the Lake Erie watersheds. So we ended up looking at Hillsdale, Lenawee, Washtenaw, and Monroe. But our primary focus for the appraisal pilot was Lenawee because it's centrally located. It has relatively uniform soil characteristics, the availability of sales data, and the soil types that exist in Lenawee do extend into the neighboring counties, and that they are significant for agricultural purposes. And then the final thing that I will just mention before I hand it off to my colleagues here is that when we were trying to identify folks to be a part of this pilot project, we wanted to make sure that operators that we were recruiting had that their properties had certain similarities so that they could be compared. We were looking at similar acreage ranges, similar slopes and erosion susceptibility, similar NCCPI scores, that kind of thing. And again, overall, we did four formal appraisals, and those 4 farms were chosen because these operators have adopted soil conservation practices. They represent top management for soil health in the region. We also then compared them to 3 recently sold farms that represent more conventional management. But we also wanted to understand the highest and best case for or example of soil health in the region. So we also looked at one CRP field, Conservation Reserve Program field, that had been idle for a good number of years, perennially vegetated. And this field's soil represented the absolute highest, or we assumed represented the highest soil health for the geography. And we'll get more into the results of in a moment here. But with that, I will hand it off to Doug to talk about at least the first steps of the appraisal, this modified appraisal process.
Thanks, Lucas. And again, welcome everybody. Glad you're able to join us today for this discussion. And, when Lucas first approached me to work on this pilot program, it's very interesting to me because I've always felt that there's opportunity for other ways than just the conventional appraisal methodology that we could start looking at things. And so I thought this was a good start in a way of maybe finding those additional metrics that we can come up with. So we started out, as Lucas said, we focused on Lenawee County. There was a lot of data available within Lenawee County. So we got the basic information from the equalization department. They sent us their entire download of sales for the last several years so that we could start looking at it over a period of time and make sure that we were adjusting for differences in time, location, etc. So we documented the foundational metrics of each of the subject properties that we use, as well as the comparable land sales that we got in the market area. So we're looking at, as Lucas said with his previous table, I guess what I'm going to call conventional metrics: dollars per acre, dollars per NCCPI point, dollars per tillable acre, what the cropland classes are. Then we divide cropland classes primarily into different classes based on soil productivity, land use, etc. So one thing that just an interesting point that as we work across the country, there are other points of interest that are metrics that are used in different areas, like Iowa as a CSR, corn suitability rating, CSR2. A lot of appraisers out there use that as a metric. Illinois, Indiana use a weighted average corn yield number, productivity index that's established for a property. But again, what we have to realize too is NCCPI, CSR2, productivity indexes. Those are all based primarily off conventional thinking, I guess, the soil surveys, NRCS data, etc. So, our hope here is that we can come up with another metric that we can use using that soil health index that may be not quite as, I guess, regular, for lack of a better term, that isn't based on just USDA data or NRCS data, but it's based on farming practices that a farmer practices that may develop a higher level of soil health. So we collected it, we mapped all the information, getting information from the courthouse and interviews with property owners, etc. Then we collected and verified all the sales data. We looked at the qualitative factors, including, as we've got here, drainage and utility, and we analyzed those to get at the discretion of the appraiser to analyze that comp data to try and come up with a indicator of value on a unit basis. So you can flip ahead.
And this one, maybe Rob would be best suited to talk about our sampling methodology.
Yeah, so basically, each farm that we went to, we picked a field that represented the practices well and the soil types that we were looking for, and just did the common soil cores that are done with taking a CEC or a sample for a CEC test. And we weren't able to get as deep as we wanted to because the ground was fairly hard and dry, even at that time of the year in that part of the state. Although the CRP plot was very soft, as to be expected. Yeah, so that's about it for this slide. And then the lab that I used was Midwest Labs out of Omaha, Nebraska, and they have a soil health package that includes this common CEC test and the Haney test and a water soluble test, and then some additional tests on specifically for soil biology, such as the total water extractable organic carbon, the total water extractable organic nitrogen, the ratio between those, and then the 24-hour carbon dioxide release from microbial activity. And then I wanted a physical measurement as well, and so I requested that they do a bulk density, and that was helpful. And then we combined those numbers to create a score, and the next slide will, I think, depict that. Yep, so the column on the very left, the idle land is at the top, followed by the 4 top management benchmark farms, and then the 3 randomly chosen, recently sold plots that we don't know a lot about the history on. The combined soil health score is a combination of the Midwest Labs soil health score plus a proportionally included bulk density score. And remember, the smaller the number on the bulk density, the better. So as you can see, the CRP was the softest, the least dense at 1.14, and then the 4 next farms are similar. And then the first sales plot, the S24, had a similar bulk density to those top management farms. And then if we go to the column on the right, the organic matter, you can see how it falls generally from the CRP to some of the more poorly managed sales plots that we came across. So going back to the combined soil health score column again, the S24, which was not considered or not known about the history, appeared to us as we sampled it as if it was a top management field because it had a cover crop on it and it was fairly healthy feeling and looking. And you can see that the numbers from that one are comparable to the fields from the top management farms that we chose to sample. And then S25 and S71 both appeared at the time to be managed not so much for soil health, and these numbers then confirm that pretty obviously. So if you go down to the bottom, the average benchmark farm had a combined soil health score of 26.8, and the average sales plot 19.2. I would consider that significantly different. Bulk densities were fairly similar. Organic matter only slightly different. And keep in mind, this is not designed to be a rigorously, data analyzable scientific study. It's more just to give us a general idea of whether these sets of fields can really be compared, and is there a difference? And I would say most certainly there is. It's just at some point it would be good to expand on this just to solidify that data. I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Rob. And I will hand it back to Doug to describe probably the most intense slide that we have for you today. This is a bit about some of the background and homework that Doug did for us.
All right, so we analyzed the data, taking a look at different land classes, tillable, irrigated, woodlands, etc. And we came up with the resulting price per acre. We also we had a spreadsheet that had, I think, 70 some different sales on it. We sorted those sales based on sale price or price per acre, sale date, NCCPI rating, dollars per NCCPI point, and trying to take a look also if we could determine any land management practices as a result of our analysis. So we had that, and we used that data then to provide an overview of trends, and also taking a look at published data from USDA that could support the trend study. So we collected cash rent data from the subject farms and the comps to determine what impact soil ratings may have on income levels. And as Lucas has previously indicated, when we look at the potential savings that result from soil health or healthy soil, I think that is probably one of the greatest impacts that will result in appraisal methodology in the future being able to take into consideration if you've got a good soil health index, you may be able to either get a higher cash rent, or if you're operating the farm, you'll have a resulting net income that will be greater. And income has a direct correlation to value, utilizing the income capitalization approach. We're focusing a little bit more rather than on the income approach, but in the sales comparison approach as we try and develop some kind of empirical opportunity to analyze sales utilizing soil health. But when we looked at our sales, we did some regression on it using multiple regression techniques. And this is kind of, unless you're a statistician, some of it may not mean a whole lot, but the important ones are, if we look at the bottom table there, the bottom three lines, we looked at NCCPI, we looked at the total size of a farm, and we looked at the sale date. We'll start at the bottom with sale date. And if you look at the T-stat column, that has a number of 0.424827. And basically what that's telling us is that the sale date had very little statistical strength, for the lack of a better term. So it wasn't statistically significant in determining a value per acre. Then we jumped up and we'll take a look at the NCCPI, and you would start thinking on I'll say a gross basis. Overall, you would think that NCCPI rating may have a impact on the value of a piece of property. However, when we looked at the T-stat on that, it was 0.2627, which is quite low. So from this market study, there is very little empirical support for looking at NCCPI as a measurable metric that has an impact on the value of a property. Finally, we just looked at the sales and the overall size, and this one was significant, which we would really expect that obviously the larger the farm gets, the more it's going to sell for. And so when we looked at it, this is a useful statistic in that if we were looking to adjust based on the size of a property, every additional acre would result in a additional value of 7,855, that first column there under coefficients. So again, looking at a combination of the coefficient and the T-stat, you can start seeing that productivity is not having a significant impact on value, at least out of our sample size. And the sale date did have some correlation, but again, not real strong. So again, the size had more to do with it, and that's exactly what you would expect. That the larger the farm, the more it's going to sell for. So that was kind of our regression analysis. We looked at a lot of different factors and trying to determine, what is really impacting the value of a property. And we really, from an empirical standpoint, obviously we looked at with the NCCPI, that just is not having a real strong correlation to value. So moving forward, we looked at the soil health differed among the properties, and Rob and Lucas can jump in here too. But our idle CRP land had the highest overall soil health, and the farms that adopted soil health practices were above average. And then those conventional management farms that were the bottom two sales in the array had the lowest soil health. And so we use it in the income approach and the sales comparison approach on all 4 properties. And basically the long and the short of our analysis indicated that there's insufficient empirical evidence at this time available in the marketplace that we can utilize that soil health index in any meaningful approach to value. So that's it didn't surprise me to come up with that conclusion, because when we typically see farmers buy and sell land, soil health is not something that they're all that interested in at this point in time. But I do think that as time passes and there's more interest in soil health that's generated, it will become a metric that as appraisers we'll have to take into consideration. So I'll turn it back over to you, Lucas.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. That's exactly right. And just to really hammer home, our conclusions as it relates to our results. First, we just wanted to underline that what we did was a proof of concept, that this modified approach is very much still in its early days. And kind of the main steps of this modified approach were to collect the typical foundational metrics that appraisers collect. The way that we modified this approach was that we then collected soil health data, and we created this very simple, replicable soil health index score. And that score was then used to analyze the subject cohort and see if there's any kind of associations or correlations between the dollar per acre, the value of the land, and those soil health scores. And ideally, moving forward, if there was some kind of correlation, then that would be where Doug or another appraiser would be able to form some kind of opinion about the influence of a property's soil health on its value. And when we just again, to hammer home, our results of our soil sampling showed that we were very happy to see that the properties that we know were managed with the most soil conservation practices in mind did have the highest soil health. So that demonstrates to us that management for soil health is reflected by adopting those practices does reflect in higher measurements of soil health. And then, as Doug mentioned, really where we're at right now is just there's a lack of market evidence to tie measurements of soil health to a property's value. So we don't want to end on a down note whatsoever. So the good news is we have plenty of next steps and additional resources for you here. But just to wrap everything up into a nice bow. Just a reminder that soil health is something that is measurable, and we see that it can be improved. Our results contribute to a large body of scientific evidence that adopting the right practices in the right context can improve soil health. We also have shown that a simple soil health index can be created and can be used in an appraisal approach. However, that soil health index at the moment, at least according to our findings, there is no correlation for appraisers to form an opinion of value at the present. And for this approach to move forward, the conditions need to be met that we described at the beginning of this presentation, that the economic benefits of building soil health, there needs to be consensus among market participants, buyers, sellers, lenders, appraisers, that building soil health by adopting these practices does have some economic benefit. And of course, this involves a level of continued education and outreach that Delta Institute will be continuing to do as we move this work forward. And I just wanted to leave with this proof of concept figure on the right side of the screen that is from a conceptual appraisal report where we have the foundational metrics on top, but then have included measurements of soil health at the bottom as well. So in terms of some additional resources that were created in this project, I want to hand the mic off to my colleague Jillian, who has been working on making soil health reports and some systems maps of testing facilities as it relates to this work. So Jillian, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for the introduction, Lucas. I've been working on the soil health reports for each of the farmers that we worked with for this project. And the goal of this was really for them to be able to look at this and quickly determine, where their property lands on these metrics that we chose, especially in comparison to their neighbors or people who maybe manage their farm differently.
Yeah, and absolutely. And before moving to the next slide, I would also mention that, in our proof of concept, this report would be something that is included as an appendix to an appraisal report, just to provide a bit more context to producers.
Do you want to also just briefly discuss the similar results that you found from your other study, Lucas, or we just want to?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be happy to just briefly say we did this, a similar parallel pilot project in Illinois, and we found really the almost identical soil results there. And in terms of soil results, that properties that were managed for soil health were substantially higher in their assessments of soil health than those that had not. So we're seeing that there is this, we're creating at least empirical evidence that adopting these practices does reflect in the assessments of your soil health. So yeah, we were happy to see that there as well.
Yeah, and the other component of this was that, as Lucas mentioned earlier, we all went testing to be quick, easy, and affordable. So something that we tried to do was we surveyed about 32 or 33 facilities across the greater Midwest area, and we polled them about what indicators of soil health that they had testing capabilities for, how much these items cost, and what we can expect for a turnaround. And what we found, unsurprisingly, is that many facilities don't have the testing capabilities to test all of our chosen indicators. So as you can see, those facilities that did have these ability are all indicated in red on this map. But more importantly, even if you aren't looking at our chosen indicators, we wanted to make a quick and easy way for people to look at this and determine, where they can get their soil tested and what they're going to be able to get out of it.
Thank you, Jillian. And the final slide here before we open it up to questions and discussion. Again, we're going to share this slide deck with everyone, but we have plenty of further information here on case studies that might be of interest to folks here looking at the economics of soil health. These are case studies from Illinois, but they are corn and soybean farms, which might be of interest to folks in Southeast Michigan. And plenty of soil health testing guides, standard operating procedures, things of that nature. So with that, we want to take time for questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen here and see if we have any questions for the group here.
One additional comment that I would make, Lucas, is that as we go forward with analysis of this type, I think appraisers are going to have to become more aware of the impacts of soil health and soil quality on the farm's value, and it may result in some additional questions being asked by an appraiser as they go out to do an inspection or to verify a comparable sale. And just farming practices. Do you have a soil test on the farm? Things like that. I think that would be something I would like to see appraisers start doing.
Yeah, and if there are any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. We'd be happy to answer those, but I guess I can also
Can I build off of that and ask a quick question, actually?
Absolutely.
What's the best way to educate land appraisers then? Since there will be more of it needed to be done on soil health.
I think that one of the things we can do to help this process, Melissa, would be to make farm appraisers more aware of the impacts that soil health has on income from a farm, as well as just in general, the overall desire of farmers, I think, as practices become more focused on use of cover crops, less reliance on tillage, things like that. I think we need to make appraisers aware of the fact that these are factors that affect value. So through a continuing education process, maybe, developing a seminar that discusses how soil health could have a bearing on value. And that's one of the things we need to start asking when we go out and do our inspections. And we always ask, is the farm tiled? What tile is probably the biggest impact on value in Southeast Michigan on value for drainage purposes. But again, I think it's just a matter of educating through a continuing education type seminar or something like that for farm appraisers that would say, hey, here's some more questions we need to start asking, and we need to start thinking about the impact on soil health on value.
Thank you, Doug. We've got two questions here from Benjamin, who I also think is Simon as well. First question is, can these reports be used when seeking financing, perhaps improving access with reduced rates?
That's a great question. And I think that lenders need to also realize that the value of their collateral and the resulting potentially increased income is going to make them more secure in their lending decision. But again, it's a process of having lenders become aware of the impact of soil health on value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just connect two comments here with just a bit more information saying that in our next scopes of work, Delta Institute is hoping to partner with lenders or lending organizations to better understand that possibility. And part of that work is to answer a question from Aline Smith here in the chat, trying to use existing data from orgs like American Farmland Trust, Soil Health Institute, to build that business case or to build, consensus. So to answer that question, Aline, there is empirical evidence for these kind of for that that's building soil health has some kind of economic benefits on farm, but a lot more work needs to be done, and that's something in addition to working with lenders in the next steps we'll also be trying to contribute to. And another question from Simon here is a really good question. Doug, is there a risk that higher appraisal due to improved soil health will increase taxes?
That's a good question. And in Michigan, understanding the property tax law, that, assessments only go up, the rate of inflation or 5% due to Proposal A does have a limitation on the increase in taxes. So they can't just automatically increase your taxes as a result of better soil health. I have wanted to work for years on the tax policy in Michigan and have farmland assessed more on its productive capabilities than on its location or whatever they take a look at when they're doing their assessments. But so I think potentially it could have an impact on the taxes, but probably not until a property were to be sold and it becomes uncapped.
Thank you.
I'd be interested in hearing anybody else's thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. And just to answer another question here from Simon, when use farm income, are we talking about profit? Because well-managed farms may see reduced or stable yield with considerably reduced inputs, meaning higher profit. Yeah, that's what we are looking at, is looking at essentially budget analyses of an operation, seeing where there's cost savings and where there's profit, trying to bring that together as a kind of holistic view. Great. Any other questions? Aline says, for what it's worth, placement of a conservation easement on a property eliminates the pop-up tax. So conserved farms employing soil health practices may provide a more tax-controlled environment, even with soil health indicators playing a role. Doug, do you have any thoughts on properties that are in conservation or any kind of farmland protection program or something, an easement like that? Any how this approach might get weird there, or if there's an opportunity to work with those properties? Any thoughts?
It's a great question, a great comment. I'm not sure I'm ready to answer that question today, to be honest with you. So it's really I think it's certainly worth thinking about. And when I look at conservation easements, there's really two, and probably more, but two fields within the conservation easement program. You have your NRCS conservation easements that are placed on a property, and then you have conservation easements that are placed on a property for tax benefits. And they're kind of the same, but kind of not really the same. I mean, that's kind of a nebulous statement, but when you look at properties that have been put under a conservation easement for a donation to a conservancy group, there's a different, I guess there's a different demographic that's looking at doing something like that versus an NRCS conservation easement. So great question. Again, not sure I got an answer for that one today.
Yeah, absolutely. With the absence of any new questions, I have a question for you, Doug. I'll just put you on the spot. When we're looking at annual surveys of rural appraisers, farm managers, one thing that's been sticking out to me, at least, is that folks are saying that there is increased participation in buying and selling of farmland by absentee landowners, institutional investors, folks that invest in farmland through things like a real estate investment trust. And one of the things that's kind of tied to that, even if that's still a very small piece of the pie of buyer, if it's still mostly farmers that are, buying land near them, do you foresee this, if soil health can be a metric of value on land, on farmland, if these institutional investors are more interested or have an increased interest in buying land based on its stewardship as opposed to its return on investment, do you see that this could have some kind of articulation with that group of buyers? If they're looking at prioritizing, environmental stewardship of land. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a mixed bag, Lucas, because some investment groups are primarily concerned with ROI and, answering the needs of their investors with a particular internal rate of return over the investment period. When I worked at Nuveen with TIAA, they were co-signers of, I'm going to not remember the name of the document, but it was very environmentally focused and stewardship focused. And so I think that there is a growing awareness among the larger land investment firms that stewardship and soil health is imperative. And many times the contracts with the farmers have requirements to practice good soil health stewardship. So it's becoming more and more of a factor, and I think that admirably so. But again, the amount of land that's held by the institutional investors in this country is a very small percentage. But I think I was just at the land expo that People's Company puts on Tuesday, and we had a number of investors there, and they have two concerns right now, and unfortunately, stewardship and soil health is not one of their concerns. They still have to answer to their investors, and the investors typically want to see a positive growth in value, and values have declined in some areas and stable in others, and so they're not getting their returns. And I'm somewhat concerned about how that's going to impact how they look at their holdings and maybe try and maximize returns rather than maximizing stewardship benefits.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you. Great. Well, with the absence of any new questions, I think we can close out for today. We just want to again say thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you to Melissa and the Herb Family Foundation for their generous support of this project. And I also just want to extend a thank you to Doug and Rob for all their hard work. And with that, I will say goodbye to everyone. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.